We will convene the General Government Committee to order. Can you conduct the roll? I think we're both present, and we have an array of county employees here. So next we'll go on to committee actions, which we have two main items today. Item number 2A is discussion of possible action, including review of all county contracts, beginning with the Sheriff-Coroner contracts. And I'm not sure who's going to start this off.
Supervisor Jurdy?
Yes.
I believe we probably need to say something about the order of telecomments before we begin.
Okay. Has the county received any requests to make telecomments for today's meeting?
This is Deputy Clerk Lindsay Dunham, and there have been no requests for telecomment.
Okay. Supervisor Brown, does that cover it?
It should, and we had 3A public expression, but moving on, since there's no one on other than staff and ourselves, I feel comfortable moving on to 2A.
Okay, thank you. So again, the board asked for the General Government Committee to review all county contracts, and we're starting with the Sheriff-Coroner's office. So this is a continuation of a previous General Government Committee meeting. So do we have, who from staff is going to start this off?
I can start if the Under Sheriff and Sheriff are okay with that. So just to introduce myself, I'm Chris Dewey with the Sheriff's Office, and I want to first thank the committee for your patience. As you know, we presented 2 months ago our first look at our master contract sheet for the Sheriff's Office and all of our contracts, and there was a little bit of confusion about how they were organized. And so we've gone back to the drawing board and we reorganized our contracts according to the Schedule 9, the budget sheets that are done. And we worked with the CEO's office on that process. And then, and so our goal today is to present that budget sheet to you so you can take a look at that. I want to be able to answer Supervisor Brown's question she had about our jail contract, health contracts as well. And finally, I just want to mention as I start the 3 goal areas that the Sheriff's Office is committed to moving forward even after this presentation is that number 1, we want to continue to find ways to eliminate contracts if possible from the Sheriff's Office that we no longer need, or reduce contracts that we have for the Sheriff's Office. And finally, our contracts are spread along many budget line items. And so ultimately our goal is going into next budget year is to move our contracts as much as possible to our professional services budget line. Some contracts we might not be able to, but that's our ultimate goal. And we put those goals into the agenda summary sheet for you. So if it's okay, if there's no questions, I'll share my screen and walk you through this document we've created.
Sure, go ahead.
So I hope everybody can see my Excel spreadsheet. Can everybody? Yes?
It is pretty small. If you could zoom into the relevant areas.
So I'm gonna start with the first part of it, and then I'll work my way through it. The first sheet that you see is our first tab on the sheet is a table of contents, and we created this sheet so that you could quickly go to a single budget item. To do that, along the bottom with these tabs, we've organized them into 4 critical areas. The first is the contracts we've already worked to reduce, and the committee received this information last time, and this is regularly updated on a regular basis as we reduce contracts or eliminate contracts. These are the number of contracts and the amount of savings we've already been able to do within this budget year. And then along the bottom are a series of tabs, and they're color coded. The first is the blue series, and these are budget items that don't impact the general fund. These are budget items that might be inmate services or grants or trust funds that we have or state fundings that we have that we then contract for services. And there's 3 different areas that are spread across the bottom that you'll see. The next are the green tabs, and the green tabs are for the sheriff's field services. And the first tab you'll see is it really is a reflection of our budget 9, and it has up here at the top our revenue sections, our 1000 series salary sections, and then our 2000 series services section, which includes, you'll see the yellow highlights and the green highlight, areas where we have contracts in there. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. Next, I'm going to tab over to the yellow, the gold tabs, and that's our jail contracts. And in our jail contracts, they're similarly organized along our Schedule 9 with our revenues at the top, our salaries next, and then our services next, our 2000 area next. And then you'll see the highlighted areas or areas that we have contracts. Each of the blue lines is a hyperlink to the actual contract, and I'll go through that finally. And then over at the very end are our state-funded contracts and our revenue contracts. And so that's a picture trying to break down of everything the committee saw last time. It was all put together in one master spreadsheet. And so we've reorganized that into these areas, the general fund, both the sheriff's office and the jail, and then our non-general fund contracts separated out from there, and finally our revenue contracts. I wanted to go quickly to Supervisor Brown's initial questions. She had questions about the jail medical contracts. And if you look at our main sheet for the jail, you'll see our medical and dental services here. You'll see our medical and dental services here. And then you'll see our maximum contract obligations, the amount that we were budgeted for the year, and then our difference that we have. If you click on this, you'll see an actual breakdown of our medical contracts for the year for the jail services. And these include our NAVCare medical contract that we have for jail services, that we provide medical services within the jail. And it also includes our jail-based competency treatment program. This program, we receive dollars back. We actually receive more dollars back than we spend. And the difference is really money that's set aside to help offset our internal costs, the corrections deputies' time to provide the services. And those $2 figures equal the $3.7 million that Supervisor Brown had initially asked at our last conference meeting. So I wanted to just stop there and make sure the committee didn't have any questions.
I have no further questions.
Fantastic. Okay. So what we've done is we created this spreadsheet. Milan has been fantastic in working to make sure that it's linked directly to our master spreadsheet that we use to manage all of our contracts. It's updated real time as we go through this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, our long-term goal is to work with the CEO's office is that we move forward with the next budget year is to move the majority of these contracts to our professional services line. Some of the contracts we may decide working with the CEO's office to leave where they are just because of the historical knowledge that's attached to them, but we'll do that as we go through the budget process. That's kind of an overview of the spreadsheet that we created and our tracking mechanism. Our idea is to create as much transparency as possible of all of our contracts that we have, where we're spending money and how we're spending the money, and then ultimately how we could reduce those contracts if possible or eliminate them if we don't need the contracts. And I'll leave it there to any questions that the board or the committee may have.
So thank you for the presentation. So you're working through this year in preparation for next year's budget. So that's where you're looking at the contracts where you could reduce them or eliminate them, or in the middle of this year. Is that sort of your time frame?
So we've already. I just wanted to go back. Is that we've already reduced almost $150,000 from our budget going into this. From what we budgeted this year from these contracts. And then we'll continue to work on areas that we might be able to reduce our contracts or eliminate contracts as we move forward. And then ultimately work with the CEO's office as we develop next year's budget so that we can move them all to a single budget line to make it as transparent as possible where our contracts are.
So, Chris, countywide, the county is trying to reduce county contracts. I believe it's 5% across the board. That means, maybe not every contract's reduced by 5%, but as a group, they're going down 5%. Do you know where the sheriff's contracts are on that scale?
I'm not sure. I don't know yet. I apologize. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to come back and work on that for you. I know that we've made a significant progress towards that 5%. I'm not sure if we've met that goal or if we still need more work to do there.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I guess Supervisor Brown?
Yes, and I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this. I think it was worth waiting the month. And in looking over the agenda summary, certainly the goals for the future that have been set, 1 through 3, I think are very meaningful. And I appreciate all the work that's been done and moving into the future. I think it'll benefit all of us, and as was earlier stated, will give us a lot of transparency for the contracts, the funds allocated, and the tracking of the finances associated with the contracts. I think that's really important because it can impact the county budget.
Okay. Chris, anyone else from the sheriff's office, would they like to talk about this?
I'm not sure if the sheriff or the undersheriff wants to weigh in or
I know that Aaron has been working on this pretty diligently with you folks. One of the things that we started looking at the beginning of this year was we're not in a time where we can have things that are nice to have. And so we're looking at things that are absolutely necessary versus what's nice to have. And so as we go through this, let's face it, the county's in a situation right now where we can afford meat and potatoes, but there will be no gravy, and we understand that. And that's why we've been looking at all of these things. We can get right down to the razor's edge on what affects public safety. And, I think that if all of us look at it and make a decision that something's going to affect public safety if we get rid of it, that's a hard no. But if it doesn't affect public safety, then we're going to be more amicable to looking at getting rid of these things. So that's been a goal for us all year long. But the concern is, of course, during the time of the pandemic and the fires and everything else, there have been a lot of things that we've been using more of than what we did in years past. Social media is one of them. And I think that it's served us well. But, in these years like we had, I guess it was last year, where we didn't have all of the fires and the issues, I think that we've got to be able to kind of play it by ear, and hopefully we'll make some headway on it. Darren, would you like to weigh in?
Just to expand on that a little bit, I truly want to thank the CEO, Carmel Angelo, and her staff for assisting us in figuring out this contract system, how it's supposed to work. And I think they truly understand that the sheriff's office is doing everything they can to mitigate this situation and get through these tough financial crisis, especially with the pandemic going on with the fires. They've been great. So I just want the board members to know that it's great to be able to collaborate with the office and mesh as well as we have been. So thank you.
Okay, I know that Darcy, the Deputy CEO, and CEO Carmel Angelo are on. Do either of you have anything to add from the CEO's office?
Thank you, Chair Journey. I think that Deputy CEO Antil and Deputy CEO Raul have really been working with the Sheriff's Office, so they would know more than me. I appreciate the partnership. This is not easy, first of all, trying to get the whole county on a new system with our contract database, but we believe that that will be the best course of action to manage our contracts. So, I would just like to thank the sheriff, the undersheriff, Chris Dewey for all their work, and I'll defer to my deputies if they have anything else they'd like to add. Thank you.
Good morning, Darcy Antil, Deputy CEO. I just really appreciate all the work that Under Sheriff and Chris Dewey have put into this with the support of the sheriff. It has been challenging and it's been a learning process, but I think we've come together as a team and been able to respectfully work with each other and communicate the education that needed to occur. And I look forward to working with them as we consolidate the line items into next year's budget. So thank you.
Good morning, Janelle Rao, Deputy CEO. I'll echo Deputy CEO Antil's comments. I do want to really extend a great appreciation to the Sheriff's Office, the Undersheriff, Sheriff, and their staff. They inherited a lot of this, so it's a learning curve for them. And I think that there needs to be an understanding of the magnitude of what they're trying to wrap their heads around. So a great appreciation going out there. This has been collaborative. Some of it painful, but we truly do appreciate it, and we're in this together. So I also want to extend our appreciation to the standing committee for the time that was allowed for us to work towards this. I think that everyone will benefit from this level of transparency in the future. I do believe that working with our committee and trying to identify efficiencies as we move forward. We have several initiatives that are coming forward that are about efficiencies and using our finance system and how we budget. So all of us working together, I think, in the end will benefit. And I just want to extend my appreciation. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd say that's great to hear. And just if we didn't have the pandemic, we didn't have the fires, we still had an important work project here because just a refresher, we approved 3-year contracts. The board wanted, everyone wanted to bring county pay as competitive as we could with our region. We've done that with a 3-year contract, but in doing so, we need to work together to find efficiencies wherever we can throughout the entire county system. And so just getting the budget system working in an integrated fashion throughout all the departments throughout the county, I think will be a big help in that. And I do appreciate the work everyone's put into this because we needed to do this even if there wasn't a pandemic, even if there wasn't the fire situations that we've been having year after year, just because we have an increased cost through the compensation system for the county, and so we already knew the budget was going to be a little bit tighter each year, and so this is a very important work. Some people ask me in the community, like, well, what's the job of being in county government? What's the most important job in county government? I say, in some respects, it's balancing the budget, and at times it feels like it's the loneliest job in county government. But today I'd say it's not the loneliest job. I feel like everybody's working together on this and really appreciate seeing that.
I'll second your statement. And thank you, Supervisor Jurdy, because I fully agree.
Okay, well, with that, I know that the CO's office will be working with other county departments in the months ahead to continue to work with everybody to make sure everyone's fully utilizing the software system that the county has. And if we don't have any additional comments from the Sheriff's Office, I think we can go on to our legislative platform. Okay, well.
Supervisor Jurdy?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say I'm on my way out the door, so to speak, but I do appreciate very much the collaboration that has gone on. And again, looking at the goals and going over those, I think it is a good plan as we move into the future. So thank you, Sheriff's Department, and thank you, CEO staff. And we can move forward. But one question before we leave, this agenda item, do we have a report on what will be next that the general government will be going over?
Chair Jurdy, if I could jump in on this. Actually, we were thinking about the planning department. They're quite inundated at this point. So I would ask Chair Jurdy, Supervisor Brown, what department you would like to review next. We could do planning, we could do Department of Transportation. Health and Human Services has half of the county contracts. That will be a very lengthy report, probably over, I would say, probably 3 meetings. So it's up to you. I was thinking planning, but we could do Department of Transportation. And I don't know if either Darcy or Janelle has anything to add on that or has any other suggestions.
I'd just like to jump in.
Yes, please.
Because I do feel that Health and Human Services will take several meetings, although I know their contracts are being reviewed by a number of advisory boards throughout the year. But my statement about I'm almost at the end of my term, I would like to see, Department of Transportation, because the General Government Committee will change after the first of the year.
So if Chair Jurdy is okay with that, then we will contact Director Dashiell. And for next month, which would be October, right? Geez, it's going quick. We will bring Department of Transportation forward to General Government.
Makes sense to me. They must have quite a few contracts, I would guess. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
and
thanks.
the other point I just wanted to make is Supervisor Jurdy, you will be our upcoming chair. So, neither of us will be on general government in the coming year.
Okay. Right.
I believe. So I think it's Health and Human Services, the larger departments with lengthy contracts. I think it's important to bring the smaller amount of work forward first.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll now move on to our legislative agenda.
Good morning, Standing Committee, Supervisor Jurdy and Supervisor Brown. So today in your packet, you have a memo regarding the 2021 legislative platform. And so back in January, there was some discussion with the board when we adopted the original legislative platform that there was a desire to kind of see it streamlined, to see less categories, to see more concise bullet points, and to really focus on a few areas within each category, as well as specifically breaking out federal action items versus state action items. So I've outlined that in the memo. I reviewed the current categories that we have and kind of condensed them into kind of draft priorities for you guys to review, and also kind of created a new format where we would do a few sentences or a paragraph really describing the issues of the category, why they're important, and then going into the state action items and the federal action items and kind of keeping those to concise, like maybe 4, 5, 6 bullet points. And so we'll go briefly over the priorities, and then I put in a sample using disaster recovery, preparedness, and resiliency to kind of give you an idea of what the new format would look like. So looking at last year's legislative priorities, we definitely still are in disaster response and recovery and really working towards resiliency. So that still is a major category and topic for us. We have something new, which is part of disaster, but really separate and unique, which is COVID-19 and the resources and the advocacy will be needed to do at the state and federal level as we deal with this over the next 12 months. The next category is kind of a consolidation of a couple different areas, really focusing on natural resources. So that could be water, climate, land management, agriculture, secure rural schools, PILT tax, all those type of areas. In the economic and community development, health and human services, public safety, and then cannabis. And that's really cannabis if you want it as a standalone item, but I also think you could probably incorporate that in natural resources, but we might have 3 or 4 items for the state and federal for cannabis. So it might be worth pulling that out. So those really are the draft legislative priorities, and you'll see on the second page a sample. So I wanted to take this time to get your feedbacks to make sure those priority areas are correct and see if we need to add them, change them, and if there's really specific items that you want to make sure that's included in our advocacy in calendar year 2021.
Supervisor Jurdy?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I was not an advocate of changing how our process and our legislative platform was laid out. However, it is what it is. But I think you've done a good job in the outline. I guess the question I have is when and how will we communicate with the different departments to get their feedback?
So following this meeting, I'll be sending out a memo to all of the department heads, including a little bit of background on kind of the priorities for this year and the categories, and ask them for their feedback by a particular date. It will kind of depend on when the next standing committee meeting is. I think last year we gave them until the second week of November to provide any feedback or any specific issues. I am sure there'll be a few. We had some last minute legislation about probation and some of the changes in the juvenile system. So I'm sure that will be in the legislative platform as well as COVID. So following this and the selection of the priorities, we'll be sending out a memo to the department heads.
Thank you. And also, I'm in favor of cannabis being a standalone item.
And my question when just looking at this, I would say it is a very streamlined format that you have in your sample. The statements are so general. I'm just curious, what level of detail would we be able to incorporate from the departments? Maybe we could give them a shorter deadline just due to the fact that the statements in the bullet points in the new format are very, very general.
Yeah, this one I think is particularly general with disaster recovery because we're talking about a lot of different disasters and going with FEMA. You'll probably see stuff that's more specific, like in cannabis, there'd be something specific about provisional licenses. In natural resources, there'd be something really specific about PILT. So I think some of them that are really focused areas, or we know there's something major going on, like a state realignment, or the state's really looking at something. they'll be a little bit more specific, and some of them will be more broad, but we can definitely give them a shorter period of time to kind of let us know what their big ticket items are. I'm aware of a few just because the way the session ended, this legislative session, and some of the major changes, we know there'll be some issues around health and human services and around public safety that we'll need to make sure we're staying engaged on. So we can definitely send it earlier to them or tell them to get back to us sooner.
Okay. And just in general, I mean, we may have some issues related to housing in our economic development and community development section. But regardless, the legislature has passed a number of important bills on housing, whether it's in our legislative platform or not. So I realize our legislative platform just can't address every single issue, even if there are important issues that are affecting Mendocino County. But I think the new format is fine. It allows for flexibility in writing letters throughout the course of the year as legislation is amended and is introduced. So I'm fine with the new format. Do you have direction that you need from the committee? So we're okay with the priorities. Are there any specific items that you want to really make sure that we're monitoring this year, or of this particular interest that we need to make sure we include in the legislative platform?
I do have one. It's the bill by Senator Dianne Feinstein, and it is on U.S. forest management. I think that is very important. I'm hoping to find the time to bring forward an agenda item so the board can get a letter written. When it says draft priorities, I look under natural resources. I see SRS. I don't think we receive funding from that particular federal program. Do we?
Well, that program has gone through periods where we haven't been funded at all, and then sometimes they'll do an authorization bill and fund it. But we haven't gotten funding recently from SRS, but
I know
that we're precluded from getting some in the future. But it's kind of one of those things that we monitor really closely with the PILT.
Yes, well, I know they kind of run together. I just didn't think we qualified for SRS, but thank you. And then I'd also like for General Government Committee to set up the timelines so we get a finalized document to the board before the close of the year.
And I would just like to add, Supervisor Brown brought up a good point. I'm not familiar with Senator Feinstein's bill, but it may be under natural resources, just sort of this big issue that we've been facing for several years of forest management, and as it relates to containing wildfires. And, it just seems like when you look at the forest management and the timber industry in general, it's a for-profit business, so people can only do what they can afford to do. And with the management of the forests. And it seems like there's a gap there in that, you have undergrowth in the forests that it's not profitable to remove. And yet it needs to be removed. The undergrowth needs to be removed and contained so that you don't have fast wildfire spread. And one idea that's been kicking around for years is, biomass energy but that doesn't really pencil out without some kind of subsidy. It just seems like maybe if we could have something in our legislative platform that just addresses the lack of a market for managing forests in a way that reduces fire spread.
Well, Supervisor Jurdy, in response, through the last 3 decades, the U.S. Forest Service has drastically changed how they manage their forests. And I think we see it with designation of some of their wildland areas, but we also see it in how they manage fire. in letting it just burn when it's in wilderness. So, you know, I need to go over the senator's bill, and it does have bipartisan support. So maybe there will be more funding coming to do this, you know, biomass or whatever it may be. But it needs changes in policy as to how they manage the U.S. forests. And as we know, it's under USDA. So, you know, hopefully this bill will help correct some of the mistakes of the past. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and maybe this bill does address that issue. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the draft priorities. I think they're in line with, you know, what we're all dealing with on a daily and monthly basis. So do you need anything else from the committee?
I don't know if there's any idea of when the next standing committee will be, because we'll bring the draft platform with your feedback and the department's feedback for your review.
Well, I strongly feel, Supervisor Brown, I strongly feel that we need to continue with our monthly meetings and maybe 2 meetings, depending on the workload.
Chair Jurdy, I would agree. We are looking, since we're looking at the contracts this year, this calendar year, Sarah, we will have a meeting in October. Most likely we'll have a meeting in November, and I'm not certain about December. So if that works for Chair Jurdy and Supervisor Brown, if you would like to have some draft, do you think you'd have another draft in October, which 4 weeks from now?
Yeah, I think we could definitely have a draft, at least most of the categories completed by October. And we should have feedback. I'll get hopefully we'll have feedback by the department heads by then.
And sometimes that takes longer to get back, but I'm okay with November, but you know, I just don't want to be under a crunch time.
We'll bring back something in October, even if it's, you know, 80% or 90%. So we stay on schedule. And if we don't have all the feedback from the department heads, we can incorporate the feedback following the meeting and get a final version with department head feedback by November.
And that's great. And with our chair, Supervisor Jurdy, we'll probably report out under supervisors' reports at tomorrow's meeting, and that can give department heads a heads up that we are working on this and to start thinking about it.
Okay, and I think, and I agree with Supervisor Brown that our goal should be to have a meeting in October and November, and that if we're going to focus on Department of Transportation on the budget, if we can't wrap that up in the October meeting, we definitely want to try to wrap it up in November. We want to at least complete that second county department before the end of the year. If the CO's office thinks that we can also review a third county department before the end of the year that's maybe relatively small, that'd be great as well.
Chair Jurdy, I do. I think we can. We have enough small departments. We'll work on that for you.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that may conclude our meeting for today.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.